What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Favale coming at you with Morten Jensen of the NBA podcast fame, of Yahoo Sports fame, of Forbes fame, of OnlyFans celebrity. We are
Yes.
here to talk about with the NBA regular season coming to a close before we kind of get into the nitty gritty of the playoffs. Then we have to do off-season content. We're like, wow, like a month away, at least from that really picking up when there are so few teams playing. We want to kind of take stock of just the coaching landscape. We've done a lot of, are these teams screwed? Who has the best futures? We've done that exercise a handful of times. This is adjacent to that, but it's good to have a look at, okay, as the regular season comes to an end, which teams are going to be taking stock of their head coaching situations that, make the lottery or just don't make the playoffs, or even, the more interesting discussion is the teams that could see their coaching situations impacted by the outcome
Right.
of the playoffs. So not necessarily blowing it up. Sometimes, I mean, the easiest thing to change is the coach. We all know that.
Yeah.
And for a lot of these teams, that might be what they consider their only option. Before we get started, Mort, how are you doing?
Doing well, sir. Doing well. Kind of counting down the days for the regular season. It's funny, right? Because the more important the NBA season becomes, the less work I always feel like I have to do, because instead of covering 30 teams, you kind of cut 14 teams off and you say, all right, like of active teams, it's only going to be 16 initially. And I feel like my workload kind of decreases a little bit as the playoffs get rolling, which feels counterintuitive. So I'm very much looking forward to shelving the 80-hour work weeks and just kind of say, all right, let's get back down to our normal level.
I find myself at the moment fatigued by like the March, April basketball still of it all, because we have
Yeah.
like the tiebreak, the Eastern Conference playoff picture. I'm just over. Like it's a 4, 5, 6 race at this point, and it's just like we know what the 6 teams are going to be. The play-in doesn't move me because none
Right.
of those teams are going anywhere. But like all this West stuff is happening, and so like those games have been like high stakes. Like looking at what the Rockets were able to do the Warriors the other night. At the same time, there are some teams that just continue to miss guys with injuries. Denver with Jamahl Murray. That it's just, I want people to be healthy in the playoffs to be even higher stakes. But thankfully, we do have at least the fascinating races for
Yep.
seeding in the Western Conference, which remain hellfire. Let's dive in. I think we should begin with the coaches that shouldn't qualify for this list, which they're basically there on an interim basis. And there
Mhm.
are 3, unless we're
Yep.
missing everyone. We have Tuomas Iisalo in Memphis after they fired Taylor Jenkins. His case is interesting because doesn't it seem like he would be considered the favorite to land the gig based off how aggressive they were in adding him to the assistant staff? Or are you kind of at the point where don't ask me what Memphis is doing?
Oh yeah. No, the latter, because like that late in the season, I mean, I just don't know. I don't think we can take anything away from that yet. But it is interesting, and we do know he's offensive minded. Like this is a roster that could need more offensive creativity, especially moving forward. So yeah, I'm not closing the door on a return there whatsoever.
Mitch Johnson in San Antonio, which is just, I guess you'd call him an interim head coach. It's just he's warming Greg Popovich's spot. There was the reporting that following his stroke from ESPN that it's
Mm.
still going to come down to, it's Greg Popovich's option whether he wants to return. He had some, pretty insightful quotes to his team. Apparently, I don't know what to make of that situation. I would love to see Pop on the sideline again, but you're also in the territory of we just hope that he's healthy. And so that situation is like you can't really forecast anything, because even if you say, "Oh, Popovich isn't going to come back," I don't like, would Mitch Johnson be considered the favorite to retain the position? Like, remember when it felt like the succession plan was pretty clearly in place in San Antonio, but Popovich has coached for so long that it's kind of just become this opaque situation, which is again is
Mhm.
fine, but it makes it tougher to kind of dig into.
Yeah. No, so I've been around the Spurs a little bit because they were in Paris as well. And I just want to say this. Mitch Johnson has done a hell of a job. Like I asked Chris Paul about, his thoughts on this whole thing, because like when Chris signed, obviously he didn't know how things would shake out and everything. And he was just like, no, Mitch is a hooper. Mitch just has us engaged. Like there wasn't a single bad word. And I'm not expecting Chris Paul of all people to come out and talk trash, but like I've stayed, pretty, in tune with where the team is going and like with how players are feeling about Mitch. And whenever I asked him questions as well, he gave me really good answers, like really thoughtful answers. Like I think this guy has done a remarkable job in San Antonio. Like he didn't know what to expect there. He got thrown into it in a very public manner, like injuries in and out. Wemby goes down after 46 games as well. I know they were losing a ton of games, and people are like, well, how good can he really be? Like, really good. Like, he's the way that he has everyone on the same page, the complete buy-in. I don't know if Pop returns or not. I'm not gonna sit here and say anything about that because I have no idea. All I know is that if Mitch Johnson is ever finding himself as a coach free agent out there, a lot of teams should be interested.
Yeah, depending on how many have openings, like if they're not ready to commit in San Antonio, I would say I think he's done good enough. Like you've just kind of seen stuff with the way they might use Jeremy Sohan, some of the guys off the bench,
Yep.
even Keldon Johnson, that I would assume that he would be a pretty serious candidate should Pop not return. But even if he's not, if they know Pop is coming back, I'll be curious to see will he want to stay there or will he get interviews for any of these? We have 3 openings flat out, and then any openings that might materialize from there.
Right.
I think our third one would be interim head coach is Mike Budenholzer in Phoenix. I'm glad you caught that. It is actually Doug Christie in Sacramento.
Yeah.
My question to you is, will Vlade Divac be coaching and GMing the Kings next year?
Oh God. You really want to do that to Kings fans right now?
No.
They're suffering. Just opening up that door, man. They have it hard enough. Look, as much fun as it would be to see the 2002 Kings somehow return, I'm not sure it has to be in those specific roles. Like, I will say this, Doug Christie has done pretty good. I don't think he should be a guy you count out like for the job long term. We'll see what happens though, because I feel like the coaching question in Sacramento is like not a big priority right now. It's more along the lines of what about Sabonis? Is he going to stick around? Like, what is going to happen to the rest of this team? Like, is there even a plan in place? It feels like everything that's a bigger question is like roster related or ownership like related. Like head coach, I feel like it's like way down on the list of priorities.
Well, yeah, there's a trickle down because we know who's the owner is going to be, but I would wonder how safe is Monty McNair's job, just because if heads are
Yep.
going to roll, you would think that the front office could be in play there. The fact that they did fire Mike Brown kind of makes me think that McNair is, if you don't want to call him safe, but will be the one, they let him make the De'Aaron Fox trade, and then he does the Mike Brown firing as well. I would think he'd be the one making this decision, which I think would allow us to discuss head coaches. But again, I think, they had that kind of post Doug Christie bump immediately after the firing. That's definitely settled down. They were playing so well in crunch time, they couldn't possibly have playing so poorly in crunch time, they couldn't possibly have gotten much worse from there.
Right.
I think that you've seen, this is more of a comment on the team's depth, but like the issues are the same. Like the defense can just, if it gets set, it might be okay. They have some lineups that can figure it out. Doug Christie has to be heavily reliant on his key guys because there are questions about the depth. Keon Ellis has generally played more under him. I think that's good. And he's shooting like 45% from 3 while still playing solid defense under Christie. So these are all the interim guys I would expect, like they will be in the running. I do think, these are all teams because of the Popovich ties. And then of course, just what the Grizzlies and as I'm choking over here, Grizzlies and Kings are doing. You might not want to hazard a guess. I kind of feel like Iisalo of all the 3 that we talked has the strongest chance of being the head coach of the team that he's currently chaperoning right now, would be my stance. I'll let you have the first pick of the coach we talk about.
Can we almost have to start right with the guy who we all were like, what the hell? And I feel like that's Doc Rivers. Like, I understand that Milwaukee is a top 5 seed in the East, but at the same time, it's Doc. Like, he tends to pick up good regular seasons, and in the playoffs, we'll see. I think he is a guy we shouldn't, place as the guy moving forward next year necessarily. Like, I'm not saying he's going to get fired. They played well after the All-Star break overall. Like, there's nothing right now that's super pressing. But I feel like this is still a team that could flame the hell out in the playoffs. And if they do, like if they get bounced in the first round, are we not going to, like you said at the top, Dan, like the easiest thing to do is make a coaching change. Are we sure Milwaukee wouldn't go that route if they get completely curb stomped in the first round?
You have to at least consider it, right? If the plan is to run back Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo, and I don't think what helps is we're having this discussion right now. It's not just that the playoffs have not taken place. It's that is Damian Lillard even going to be a participant in them because of the DVT in his calf? So I think you look at it, but it almost kind of feels like if you're now making like another head coaching change within this 2 or 2.5 year window, do you almost think that, okay, has the Giannis situation gone to crap at that point? And so are you just making a head coaching change because you made such a roster overhaul? Or do you think that it is, this has become an interesting debate among Bucks fans, and they're more divided than I expected them to be. I have fallen into the camp that just because of how your picks are owed and spread across the league, until Giannis says that he doesn't want to be there, I'm just trying to ride this thing out. But a lot of Bucks fans, and I'm sure media people, believe that, well, you should just move him now, get the best return possible, and start over. Which, if you're going that route, we know you'll get rid of Doc Rivers because that's not really his thing. Do you think it's more likely that they get rid of Doc Rivers and try and basically run it back or improve on the margins? Or do you view this as, if you're getting Doc Rivers, this could be more of an implosive proposition with, well, there are some other pretty seismic roster moves happening here?
That's interesting. Like I will say what side I fall into with Giannis specifically, because that kind of dictates everything. You have to just, like you said, ride with him as long as you possibly can. Yeah, Giannis is the type of guy who occasionally like goes to the media and says something sort of like insinuating, hey, you know what? Like I have options. And it's always like to motivate the inner workings of the front office to get something done. I don't think he wants to leave Milwaukee. He's super loyal. He's like a very, what do you call it? Like the people who like comfort, who like wants to stay a homebody. That was the word I was looking for. I don't think he's particularly interested in moving off. Like he's won the title first and foremost. I think that just getting that monkey off his back is huge. That means that there's less pressure on that whole situation. But I do think he still wants to be in a competitive, like on a competitive team. He wants to fight for another ring. He wants to do all those things. The question is, the roster is one thing. You have the coaching staff. There's still questions around that. Like, can you get anything for, like, let's say Dame is going to be fine. Can you get younger if you pivot off him? If so, how better can you even get better in that regard? I'm not sure. It does feel like eventually something's going to give here, because the Bucks can't keep getting older and older. Like they have to become younger. And that's where we run into the Doc Rivers problem. Like, is he going to play young guys where the organization is going to need them to get investment minutes on the court to develop? Or are they going to look at that and goes, hey, look, Doc, we just need you to play those guys. And if you don't, you're fired. Like, I don't know how that's going to play out. Regardless, I think there's going to come a tipping point there.
And there's also kind of, he's played like, okay, AJ Green and Ryan Rollins and Kevin Porter Jr., but for the most part, he's had to. So what happens? I mean, you look at a KPJ, I guess, specific, and Ryan Rollins, of course. If Dame was healthy, how much are you dusting those guys off in the playoff would have been a nice barometer for, okay, can Doc do this? Because we've mentioned this ad nauseum now, but like Taurean Prince, Gary Trent Jr., free agents that you do not have bird rights on. Brooke Lopez is going to be a free agent too. I will say, I'm assuming Dame is, I don't think Dame is unhappy there, but I was curious and kind of banning about, like, is there a situation where Dame might see the writing on the wall with Giannis long term and decide that, oh, I'm just going to ask her out now? And you kind of brought the challenges up with that well, is there a way for you to get better while moving Damian Lillard? And if you can't, I'm not saying you have to move Damian Lillard, but if he's sort of getting a little bit cagey, like, that is going to accelerate the Giannis timeline. And so it's so many layers here. I would agree that you have to look at the coaching if you're planning on running back. I think Giannis, Dame, and let's assume they re-sign Brooke. Either way, like, there needs to be moves made with this roster, and forget about the financial situation. Like, they're going to start the offseason under the tax without Brooke Lopez's money on the books. That being said, do you trade? You have a 2031 or 2032 first round pick. If you don't know what's going on with Giannis, if you don't know what's going on with Dame, it makes it that much harder to improve the roster because you can't put your best assets on the table.
Yeah, totally agree. And so that's why I bring him up, because I think that whole situation, I think generally when we discuss these situations with coaches, you have to look at it through a wider lens as well, just organizational direction, like roster construction, all these things. And something just doesn't like, I don't, it's difficult for me to like pinpoint exactly what it is, but something to me feels off on that team. It's not just the age, which is one thing, but like I feel like the offense remains somewhat predictable, not really that creative. And then there's the counter argument that people have been making for years, like how creative a system can you really have around Giannis, who's a slasher, who's like a fast break guy, who isn't necessarily, a Luka Doncic sort of creator.
Mhm.
And that's an interesting discussion. I don't know the answer to that. Like, I don't know if it's Giannis who limits an offensive creativity, or if it's Doc, or like I don't know the answer. But I would at least try to move away from Doc before I move away from Giannis to see if there's something you can unlock with someone else.
I will say, I think there are challenges when it comes to building around Giannis Antetokounmpo, and those might
Yes.
become more pronounced as he gets older. But based off kind of what we've seen, and I know you've watched some of it as well, post-Dame injury where Giannis is just initiating everything, it's kind of proof that, hey, you can use this guy in all sorts of different ways. So I would still let it fall on Doc. And look, either way, whether it comes down to are you moving Giannis or you're not moving Giannis, like you should be looking at the coaching situation
Right.
anyway.
Yes.
Moral of the story. So I'm going to go with, I think we both could have predicted that this person's name would have wound up here. I'm going to go with Michael Malone in Denver. And they're not a team that we talked about a lot recently because they haven't fallen into like these profound buckets. But the vibes, like ever since that was it the Warriors loss, it just feels like the vibes or the Timberwolves loss, excuse me, that bonkers game where Westbrook has that sequence where misses the bunny and then fouls on the 3-point attempt. Then you
Yeah.
lose to Golden State on the second night of a back-to-back. This team is so up and down, and I think you always could have pointed to this coming to a head for two primary reasons. One, you're just getting to a point where it's the easiest thing to change is the head coach. It's now been it'll have been a couple years since the title. What else are you going to expect them to do? But two, there was clearly a disconnect between him and the front office last
Yes.
year leading into this year where who they wanted him to play. And the way for him to play some of these guys more was they had to take a club out of like no Justin Holiday on this team this year. Like you're going to rely on the younger, you're going to have to play through when Peyton Watson is healthy, give Julian Strother
Right.
minutes. I'm just curious, like what that discussion is going to be like at the end of the season. I think you look at their player development this year and okay, maybe they've discovered some things with Zeke Nnaji. Christian Brown has had a really good year overall, but the Russell Westbrook experience is kind of turning on them. And while they're not,
Oh, who could have seen that happened? Who could have seen that coming?
You have to, what I will say is that the vibes around Russell Westbrook were better in Denver for a lot longer than I would have predicted. But
That's
they're
fair.
kind of seeing now, like this is someone who can cost you games and doesn't necessarily know how to continue playing inside himself. He might always gravitate towards doing more than he should or just making bad decisions. But you just have the layer of inconsistency from your best players who aren't Jokic. With Murray, been on a tear basically for a while, but now he's injured again. And that's always been a concern with him, even when he's playing well. Aaron Gordon dealt with injuries this year and hasn't felt like the same Aaron Gordon watching, at least like watching him on defense. It doesn't feel the same. Michael Porter Jr. is just wildly like, if we need like a rolling game rating for him, I'll have to get on Adam Frommel of the director of NBA and NFL fan side. It does these rolling like player ratings. If you looked at his over the course of his career, it might have one of the wildest like peaks and valleys like line to it. So I don't know, I don't know how much responsibility I lay at the feet of Michael Malone at this point when you're looking at the personnel that's available to him. And then some of the, even if you're fine with who they let go, they couldn't keep Brown. We don't need to bring up KCP's name again. I think he's the one more so than any of the players, just because I find whether it's a Michael Porter Jr. trade or a Jamal Murray trade, I just find that so challenging to make. And I don't think Calvin Booth or that front office is going to say, well, let's attach Christian Brown or Peyton Watson to a package and really try to go, because that's the way for them to, like, you can't call it a home run package, but if you wanted to make a substantial upgrade or make sort of a real trade without touching your core, and even then they make so little, you probably have to include one of your bigger salaries anyway. I don't want to say I'll be surprised because I could see the Nuggets getting to the conference finals. I think number 2 behind OKC is I think Golden State could be that team. I think Denver could be that team. I think fucking Houston could be that team at this point. I wouldn't have said that. So to wrap it up, I'm not saying I'm tracking towards surprise if Michael Malone is going to be there, but I feel a lot less confident about Michael Malone still being in Denver to start next season than I did probably 8 or 12 weeks ago.
It's the entire issue with the front office to me that makes him a candidate. Because honestly, yeah, I'm looking at this roster and I'm thinking he's done pretty much what you can get out of it. Yeah, do I have some issues with how he's using Strother, for example? I would like to see him, get more shots off the bench and become like that primary scoring option off the bench. I don't think he's leaned into that. I think he's kind of been forced to use his starters way too much this year. Like he's lost a lot of guys. So I have a hard time putting that on him. I think that's more so on the front office. And frankly, it's not like I hated the idea of them saying, look, we're going to take a year back, like, or one step back to develop these guys, because maybe that prolongs our championship window. So maybe we'll take 2 steps forward because of that investment. Like, I'm not even saying that's a bad idea, but it just seems like the vision of those two parties don't really align. And that's why I'm there. I will say this. I've just said this on this pod before. I believe that Bruce Brown has gotten his money and is ready to come back. And if that is the case, I would like to see Michael Malone still there. He was heartbroken when Bruce left, like absolutely heartbroken. I would love to see a reunion there. So come on, Denver, just make sure Mike is there if you lock in Bruce Brown services. Just one more year. Let's see.
I think, and look, we know they're willing, I will say this. I have trolled their mini mid-level signings the past 2 years and will continue to do so because they've been awful. But they have been a team that's at least willing to use it, which is not something that's, that thing isn't being thrown around. I don't think that Bruce Brown has played well enough to command much more than that. I mean, he's shooting 37.5% from 3 in New Orleans, but like, what are his appearances at? Sub 10 appearances in New Orleans that he's going to end up with, or that's what he has at the moment. 20. I'm sorry. But I just don't think his market's going to be too robust, and so that helps them. Right. I don't know that I don't view him as someone good enough that, this is like the difference. Like, let's have us run it back. But he's definitely more of a cerebral and plug and play option, even having some similar limitations at points to Russell Westbrook when you look at how defenses respect him from beyond the arc. Clearly a better fit. I don't want to see Michael Malone leave either, just because him and Jokic seem to have a good relationship. Yeah. And not that I feel like continuity is the great market inefficiency, but there's just some situations you get sappy for. And Michael Malone in Denver has become one of them for me, in part because this is why I can't run a team, because you can't let this factor into it. But there were so many times when they were dealing with injuries before their title that some people thought it made sense to change the coach. They didn't. It worked out. That was really cool. But yeah, I just don't know. And can it almost be made difficult by what if you had to chopper in one player or acquisition? Like, what is it that this team needs the most? Because I think you can rattle off a bunch of different needs. And Bruce Brown, again, I think that's a solid, just having that type of reserve, that type of competence coming off the bench would be major. But I don't think that it alters the Denver team that we're watching, by an incredible margin.
Well, I'm baking it into also improvements from the current team. Like, I don't think Julian Strother is not going to get better. Like, I think he's going to get better going into next year. Peyton Watson, to me, is the big one, because it feels like he's the guy who could make like that leap, right? The internal leap. Going from year 3 to year 4, like, he's made these small-ish leaps every single year. I feel like if he can hit that next level next season, that is like an indirect free agent acquisition in and of itself. Mm-hmm. Bruce Brown is like the connector, the floor guy, like, the person who comes in off the bench and just kind of runs the show. He knows everything that Mike wants out of him. He knows how to play with Jokic. He won a freaking title with him. Like, I think there's something there where we're saying, oh yeah, but Bruce Brown kind of stunk up the joint over the past 2 years. Right. That's probably why he would be interested in going back to Denver, because he knows that system. He wouldn't be coming into something new. He would just roll back into a warm blanket of comfort and get to work, which I think is something that we can't understate in terms of importance. So I'm baking that in with internal improvements. Also, are we closing the door on, like, if Brown comes back, that's on a min deal, so they still have their exception? Like, is that door fully closed?
I, I mean, maybe it's not. I honestly don't know. Like, could the Pelicans decide that they just want sort of a salary placeholder on the books? Because players care about bird
Right.
rights more than ever, it feels like.
That's true.
The Peyton Watson thing's interesting because I remain so high on him, but do you think that there's a way for them to actualize anything close to his peak given the current, like, look at the players in front. I'm looking offensively at the pecking order, and he
Right.
could do things I think to fit in a larger scheme better. The look, the 3-point volume I'll forever watch, even when he's hitting those threes. But the bigger thing is there's also someone that needs to get stronger. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, he can get to the rim, especially in transition, but like his finishing is kind of whatever for someone who is 6'8". Like, it's
Right.
going to be in the medium percentile at best at this rate. So can he come back stronger? Can he come back ready to make more of it? Like, can he be a higher usage player in a larger offensive ecosystem that has, at times, if he's on the court, like, he just might be the number 5 guy when you're talking Murray, Jokic, Gordon or Porter Jr., Christian Brown. So if I was Denver, I'd probably be, even though I think that he could still technically have a higher ceiling than Brown, depending on what cost could be for either an extension, I wouldn't, if you think there's the right player out there, like, is there a higher end Bruce Brown or just a name that would come to
Right.
mind for them where it's, if you can attach Peyton Watson to, you look at the Zeke Naji, the Dario Saric player option money, I wouldn't be opposed to it just because I don't know if he's ever going to even come close to touching his ceiling on this iteration of the Nuggets.
Oh yeah, no. Like, if there's a chance to get significantly better and that is made available by attaching Peyton Watson, I'm not closing the door on that. I'm just saying that I think there is some internal improvement to expect out of him. But you're right, like, he has not shown any one of us enough over his first 3 seasons to somehow be, like, untouchable in the trade market, for example. No, absolutely not. Um, I will also say this in Denver's defense, and I know you're gonna laugh at me, and it's fair because, like, why would a team like them rely on a rookie? I get it. But the Ron Holmes going down and not playing a single minute this year, that I think was a big one because he was good value at that slot. Like, they needed someone like him with great size, with a scoring touch, someone who could rebound the heck out of the ball, someone who could just do stuff coming off the bench. For them to not have him and to go to Zeke Naji instead, who's been, let's be honest, like, he's had a couple moments this year, but before that, for a couple of years, he's been dreadful. That was a big loss. So if Holmes is healthy, and that's a big if, but, like, if they feel comfortable with his health coming into next year, that makes me a little bit more at ease in pivoting off Peyton Watson if that comes to that.
I think you could also say, but he's just like, his minutes have been up and down ever since the quote unquote breakout. If you trusted Zeke Naji enough, like, that also makes it a little bit easier because he's not
Yeah.
necessarily like the caps lock 5. So yeah, Denver is going to be fascinating for many reasons. But if I had to guess, if you're asking, well, who's more likely to be, not on this team with the team next year, we should frame it that way. You list all the players, including Peyton Watson or Christian Brown, Michael Porter Jr., or Michael Malone. I'm going to pick Michael Malone as the least likely to
Mm.
be there. Who's your next
That-
pick?
oh, that's a good one, right? So I want to I want to get out ahead of this one. So they are currently 3rd in the East. So that's why it's a long shot. It's the New York
Oh,
Knicks with tips. Like, I feel as
wait, can I say
though,
one thing?
yes, you can.
They were on my list too, so I don't think you
Okay.
need to feel bad.
Nice. All right. That actually makes me feel a little bit better. Look, it's the minutes thing. It's still the minutes thing. Like, you have 5 guys all starting who's playing, I was about to say over 35 minutes per game, but you know what? Kudos to Tom Thibodeau. Karl Anthony Towns is playing 34.9 minutes per game. Like, he's just under 35.
Load
Great.
management is ruining the league.
Really, it's like, my God, Tips. Like, but I when you have guys coming off the bench and you just don't utilize them, even if you're up by a large margin, it makes me sort of furious at times because we've seen before how that comes at the expense of players and player health and whatnot. For him to go into this situation and always double down on his primary 5, in the regular season, no less, you have to ask big questions. Like, if you are the front office, you have to ask yourself, like, we just spent a lot of assets gathering this group. Like, we have a very, very intriguing top five. Are we in some sort of risk of basically losing the value of that five sum because they're just getting grinded into pulp during the course of the regular season and playing that many minutes? And here's the thing, you can go to Tibbs and you can tell him, look, you need to tone down the minutes. Sure. That's been tried. That doesn't work.
I don't think anyone's ever tried it more. There's no way.
Right. He will sell his soul for like a November 20th win against the Charlotte Hornets if it came down to that. Like, again, this is the same guy who played Jimmy Butler 48 minutes in a preseason game back in the day. This is the guy. And like, I don't have any issues with his defense. I think his coaching, generally speaking, is perfectly sound and reasonable. The minutes distribution is just, it's so rough. And I get that people will push back and say, look at the roster. What is he going to do? Play more minutes to like Landry Shamet? Yes, Landry Shamet should play more minutes. Absolutely. Yes, you're absolutely right, listener. Players like that should get more minutes. Yes, just to make sure that the starters don't die.
I think there's a lot of Knicks fans like to dismiss it at this point. There's real stuff to the minutes conversation. It's, you don't want to, at least at the very least, you want to try and do your part to ensure those kind of soft tissue injuries aren't becoming a bigger risk. I think there's a chance Jalen Brunson's absence becomes sort of a blessing in disguise for them. For one, things they learned about everybody else, most notably OG Anunoby, but two, just having him be healthier, Brunson himself be maybe not as worn down for the part of the postseason and in better shape. Perhaps, again, you'd rather him not get injured, but at the same time, it's, well, will he actually just be better off because he got this time off that he otherwise would not have? I will say, I think that Tibbs has done some things that go overlooked still. I was worried, for instance, that, there are things that I'm not happy with when it comes to the Karl-Anthony Towns usage. But one of the things I was super worried about was, are they going to let his post-ups kind of become a crutch? And they haven't. He is driving less per 36 minutes. I'd like the three-point attempts to be higher, but I think that they've been more creative with him on offense than Tibbs receives credit for. That's a good thing. The fact that OG Anunoby has at least been empowered, I know some of it was out of necessity, that's a good thing. But to your point, this is where, and it might not even, if you don't want to make it the minutes thing, even though it's part of the minutes thing, his marriage to his guys or even his overall approach, it's problematic, especially when what he's married to is maybe not the answer. And so look at that lineup, the starting five, like on the season. They're plus 4.7 points per 100, plus 4.4 points per 100 possessions, I believe. That's like league at, like, that's in the 51st percentile. That is nothing. Like, the offense is in the 63rd percentile, the defense is in the 40th percentile. For that to be your most used lineup, if you're gonna ride your players, you would like that to be way better than it is. And the fact that he seems, this might change in the playoffs, but are you willing to play Josh Hart less to get more of a floor spacer in there when teams don't care? That, I know he does a lot for the team with rebounding, driving transition, but even when he's not taking or making nearly enough threes for defenses to care, it's the player I always reference is like, he's just not the same threat in the half court that even a Lou Dort is at this point. There will be more reactions to Lou Dort. And other things to note, just like, it does feel like he can still be stubborn to adjust his defensive principles in the middle of the game or just against certain matchups, to where it's, why aren't you doubling Devin Booker more when he's torching you? And I understand if you vote with Anunoby guarding him, that's besides the point. I think you can look at, why aren't you playing more aggressive pick and roll coverage with Karl-Anthony Towns when you know his limitations in drop? Like, I'd be interested to see the data of just like, okay, well, how much drop is Karl-Anthony Towns playing this year? And I would argue that I would say it's just too much. The problem is, I think we also have to recognize the Knicks are working through a level of success that they just have not enjoyed in roughly forever. And he seems to resonate with his players. And I think what you actually need to believe is the offense can be flawed, but if you're bringing in a new coach, I think you need to believe that they can squeeze more juice out of this defense than Tom Thibodeau by maybe incorporating more variability into their coverages. I don't know if when you look at the head coaching market right now, like is Taylor Jenkins or someone that would do that? And then how are you going to feel about his offense? Because I don't think the Knicks are inventive enough overall on offense. But like, the Grizzlies, are you going to need to hire like a certain assistant to oversee that? So I have a lot of questions. It's all going to come down to the playoffs. If they get trucked, I don't care if Boston's a terrible matchup for them. And if they win a playoff series, that's who they're facing. But if you get trucked by them, you have to consider everything. That includes, you're not trading Jalen Brunson. I want to make it clear. But and I would argue that OG Anunoby is the second most important player on this team moving forward. But if you get trucked in the second round, and it's reflective of how big of the chasm is separating you from the team that you are built to contend with, everything is on the table at that point, including and probably most likely changing the head coach.
Yep, totally agree.
Can I ask you a quick question on this? Mm-hmm. Who is more likely to be in New York next season? Tom Thibodeau, Josh Hart, Mikal Bridges, or Karl Anthony Towns?
Who's most likely not to be there?
Most likely not to be there. I'm sorry. That was a terrible phrasing.
No, all good. That's a good question.
All my questions are good questions, Morten.
They are. The thing is, like, the heart says Mikal Bridges, but then I start to think about how that would be losing face because the amount that you gave up to get him and then pivoting off of him after a year, that would be PR suicide. Josh Hart has become, the heart of the team in many ways. Like he's like his connection with the fan base is also pretty insane. That plays a factor. Mm-hmm. Also, he's contractually, his compensation level is brilliant. So like that doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. Towns is a star. Those are tough to come by, even if they are expensive. So I'm probably going to say Tibbs, honestly.
I think that's the right answer. And it sort of also would be if this team had more assets. And I'm not even talking about picks, obviously, but in terms of salary matching, like you look at the Mitchell Robinson number now when you're going to the books, but if they were able to add a certain type of player that would maybe make it easier for Josh Hart, like for Tibbs to move Josh Hart to the bench, that might be the type of move where, okay, you can sort of basically run it back and you don't need to change the head coach. I just don't know if they have, like, if they're pulling off a trade where you think they're incorporating a different starter. I know there's arguments for Deuce McBride to start right now. I'd be shocked if that happens permanently under Thibodeau. But how do you go out and get someone who's then good enough to start in place of Josh Hart in Thibodeau's eyes with the assets you have? Again, it's all going to depend on the playoffs, but they have not shown nearly enough against the good teams for us to think that these aren't going to be questions over the offseason. Right. We're on to my pick, and you took my next pick. So I'm going to go here. Mike Budenholzer in Phoenix.
Yeah.
This is
I had a feeling you'd go there.
His first year, but like this team is the second worst defense in the league since the All-Star break. I think they're back to the bottom 5 on the season. You can't fault him for the limitations of the roster, but like to kind of, and the Colin Gillespie thing, I by and large give the Suns a pass. I'm not leaning into it further just because of the names that were there. But like the inconsistent, and I think that's putting it charitably, deployment of Ryan Dunn, Oso Ighodaro, who provide actual needs. Like, let's just do the most fundamental cookie cutter overview of them. Ryan Dunn, defense, and he's actually not bad as a short roll passer. And then like Oso Ighodaro, we just have evidence that Devin Booker specifically will look excellent for the most part on offense if he has a decision-making big. Oso Ighodaro is someone who could do that in the short roll as a screener. You'd like to see him, be a little bit more aggressive looking for his own shot, of course. That's on him. It doesn't seem like the vibes are great again to where, you had the multiple reports of just like, are him and KD on the same page or him and Devin Booker on the same page? You talk about the optics for the Knicks if they move Josh Hart. The optics for the Knicks if the Suns get rid of another head coach will be terrible. But if they are, I mean, actually, does it even matter? If you're the Suns team and you want to continue, I'll say, propping up the facade that you're all about contending now, don't you kind of have to consider anything? And then even if you're taking a step back, you move Kevin Durant, maybe Devin Booker decides he wants out, you also kind of have to step back and evaluate, well, is Mike Budenholzer then the right coach for a team that's lost one or two of its stars?
Right. It's interesting because if Coach Bud and Devin Booker hadn't, had some war of words, I would probably have felt a more of ease because I feel like Booker is probably the guy to stick around, right? Like if they're pivoting off him, it's because he has gone to them and said, "Look, it's time. Like I just need to move off of this team." I don't think he's there yet. That's just my read on it, not sourcing anything. It's just I think he's like willing to see it through just a little bit longer. But it is wild that if you have Devin Booker and Kevin Durant on the same team, and none of whom are, extremely injured, like Kevin Durant has missed what 16 games this year. Like, yeah, that's something. It's not a whole lot. So if you have both those guys mostly available, and this is how you look, this is where you end up. That's rough. That is very, very rough. And that's where you have to figure out like the Booker Budenholzer relationship. Like, is that salvageable? Is there any way you can move forward? Because like Durant is out of there. This we know. Like it was
Well,
reported.
yeah, okay, go ahead. Sorry. Did you
Okay.
see the report that he's open to signing an extension with Phoenix?
No, I did not. I saw the report from Brian Windhorst saying the Suns were looking for a massive haul for him. That was what I saw. All right.
So the Ringer's Logan Murdoch had a piece. Actually, I've yet to read it, but that Durant that in it noted that Durant would be open to staying in Phoenix. Now I don't know when he was talking to Durant at that time, but if it was semi recently,
Wow.
that would seem like a pretty significant departure from what I still assume he's gone, but I was just noting it to cover our bases.
That's interesting. God,
Is
he's
it?
been
I don't
all
want to.
over the place.
This team is making me too sad for it to stay together, so I don't want them to extend Kevin
Right.
Durant.
But it's so wild, right? Because then Durant, before the trade deadline, he didn't want to go to Golden State. Then after the trade deadline, he was like, well, you know what? Like, I might be open to it in the offseason when everything kind of dies down. Like, what? Like, Kevin Durant, make up your goddamn mind, please. Like, we need to know what the hell is going to go on here. No, but like, I'm very much assuming he's out. So they will have to construct the roster around Book. And that also, I don't know how the hell they solved the Bradley Beal thing, but that's their issue.
Well, do you
Um,
think it helps at how bad the situation has got that he would just it's over the off season, it's probably easy it's not probably, it's definitely easier to relocate than that he just might widen his scope of like, oh, he would go if maybe he's not content, but he'll look at a team and say, like, oh, they're going to take all my money and I'm going to get a bunch of shots and maybe, pad my stats and it helps me with my next contract. I am wondering if it gets easier to move. Like, I would say easier than we would expect over the
right.
offseason to move him just because this situation has deteriorated so much. Why does he want? Maybe things off the court are better. Like maybe him and Devin Booker are best friends or something and we just don't know it, but that's not really anything that you've heard.
So what team would trade for Beal and give him shots though?
The Nets would be a good example. Like if they were going to burn their cap space on Beal, but I'm saying it would be a rebuilding team is more so like with Charlotte,
That's
if they're
yeah.
getting anything, like kind of send back. You look like do the Suns still have interest in Miles Bridges? You could build something around that. That's the type of team. I don't think I would be pretty surprised if any team. I mean, maybe the Bulls at this point. They did trade Zach LaVine, and why not pair him with Giddey and Kobe White? Bradley Beal, Kobe White, Josh Giddey moving
Right.
forward. Patrick Williams, yeah, baby.
Yeah, that would be hilariously bad. Yes.
So I'm just saying, does it you still view it as sort of a Bradley Beal's not gonna go anywhere over the offseason situation? I view it as I think there's
Yes.
more okay.
But maybe I'm giving, teams too much credit. Like if I'm trying to put myself in the place on a team there, right there where I'm in the chair, I have to make a call. Like I'm just not calling up Phoenix and going, "Hey guys, so Bradley Beal available?" Like I'm not going to do that.
No, that's not what I just wonder if they're gonna give them and I guess you're looking at, okay, the picks are so kind of low level, but if you're just attaching 2 first-round picks to get off Bradley Beal for they could be rotation players, but no one you view as important to your
But let's say
future.
$110 million though left of that deal.
Look, I think the no trade clause makes it prohibitive. I want to
Right.
make that
Yes.
clear. But like 2
Correct.
years is not if you already know that next season isn't it, then it
Right.
becomes, oh, he's an expiring contract. The no trade clause, I totally understand what you're saying. And what's the extent to which Phoenix, like, would they include an Iguodala or a Ryan Dunn to get off Beal? I'm sure the fan base would riot at that point.
Yeah.
But so I'm not, this is all to say, I don't think the situation is salvageable. I just don't,
Right.
it does feel like if you had to ask me, I think it's more likely that Bradley Beal is out of Phoenix next year than Mike Budenholzer.
Interesting. All right.
Do you think it's more likely Mike Budenholzer is out of Phoenix than Devin Booker?
Yes.
I tend to agree.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's Book. Like, let's give him that courtesy, right?
Oh, I don't think if and when the Suns moved Devin Booker, I don't think it's going to be proactive. It's going to be reactive to him saying, "Guys, like this."
Exactly. Like
there's no
we need to
opening
get
there.
out of this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perhaps that's the team that ends up just giving Bradley Beal a lot of shots. The Phoenix Suns, just by
virtue of trading Kevin Durant. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So my next
who's
team.
up next?
Yeah. I'm gonna not hedging my bet. That's the wrong way to phrase it. Like, I'm gonna say, depending on where they go with the roster, if they decide to just basically blow everything sky high, I'm kind of looking at Willie Green. And I'm not saying Willie Green because I think he's necessarily a bad coach or anything, but if the Pelicans do decide to hit that big, fat, red reset button, there might also be some level of thinking that, hell, you know what? If we're starting everything over, might as well also start over with a new coaching staff to optimize everything around this new core that we're building. Like, I'm not saying that Willie Green deserves to be fired because I'm not there. Not whatsoever. He seems to have pretty good rapport with his guys. He's still young. He's still someone who has a lot of potential left in the bag. But he's been there this is his 4th year. Might be time to do something else. Like, I don't know if they're planning to move off of Zion. I don't know if they're planning to make big alterations for the roster this season. I don't think anyone really knows. I think a lot of people have opinions, but I don't think we know. And I'm just assuming, more or less, that if you're going to go in and say, let's start this whole thing over, I would not be shocked to see Willie Green be a part of that whole change.
Yeah, I think he's almost, and I'm not even insulting your inclusion. I think he has to be an obvious inclusion at this point because you're at the stage of, all right, how many times are we going to go through this? You could say the available personnel, but now you're also at an inflection point as a franchise where you're going to have this high lottery pick. You've already traded Brandon Ingram. CJ McCollum's deal is winding down. DeJounte Murray is going to play when? Again, we have no idea. There's Trey Murphy. There's Herb Jones. Like, the team is still super interesting, but you have to ask yourself, you ask yourself the same question, whether it's okay, they get a lottery. Let's say they win the lottery or they get the top 3 pick. If they're going to kind of start over or take a slow approach, it's not just, well, do we move Zion Williamson? It's, does Willie Green fit into this? Apologies for the crashing noise in the background. The other thing would be, well, if you're still going for it, you have to ask, well, can he optimize whatever this roster looks like? And I think there's been frustrations, even when the Pelicans have rated incredibly highly. I think he's a pretty good, a lot of the times, I know they're 29th in points allowed per possession. I've a lot of the times been impressed with the defense he extracts out of the team relative to some of the personnel. Offensively, even when they're at their best, it does feel like, now, is this a function of the personnel that he's been given or something he does as a coach? I actually tend to lean towards the latter, given the breadth of the sample size. But New Orleans has, since Zion has entered the league, they have rated better than 23rd in 3-point attempt frequency just once. And that was Zion's rookie year when he played in 24 games. So that's something that you need to address. And I think you can say, well, do they have the personnel to do it? And I kind of look at it and say, all right, you still don't really, depending on how you feel about Karlo Makovic, like, you don't have that traditional floor spacing big. We know what Zion is. Murray was never going to be a super high volume guy. Ingram, we know his struggles. Like, McCollum's up to his 3-point attempt rate. You have Trey Murphy. But I do think you need to look, like, is there a way for them? We know what Zion can do on offense. Is there someone who can come in here and be more creative with him or be more creative with everybody else to get that rim and 3 combined frequency just at a clip to where it's, oh, this offense feels more dynamic than like the ceiling with Zion on offense is it doesn't exist. And so I think there's a bunch of, even with his limitations, I think there's a bunch of different things they could try even with him. Like, is there a way to get Zion more creative usage away from the ball? And I think Willie Green's been pretty creative with Yves Missi, or at least smart with him during when we've seen those two together earlier this year. But yeah, I just think it's a fair question, because what else are you going to do? It's not, you could say, well, they need to make changes to the roster. Aside from that incoming lottery pick, how comfortable do you feel making a trade with the intent of getting better when you're dealing with, it's not just Zion's health, but it's like, when is DeJounte Murray going to play? That's like a huge piece of this team.
You're absolutely right. And all those questions, that's a big ass gumbo that they have to answer over the course of the summer. And I wouldn't be surprised if Willie Green is an ingredient in that. So we'll see. I kind of hope that they'd be open to keeping him because I like Willie Green. Like I think there's something there in terms of his coaching. Like again, the roster stability has been, as you said, inconsistent. It hasn't been there. The roster construction as well. Like for the most part, like I think it's been a bit wonky. So like maybe there's a last gasp from David Griffin in terms of like, oh, I have an idea. Let's execute and see what's up. And
Mhm.
perhaps that is something where they're willing to include Willie Green into that and see where it goes. But at this point, I'm almost expecting Shams to hit give us a Shams bomb or whatever we decide to call it. Uh, well, within the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and you know what? We haven't mentioned this, but you have to assume David Griffin and the rest of the front office are at least on alert now. And like this is one of the changes you make if you're allowed to,
Yeah.
is to change the head coach. And so I wonder if that adds any pressure to the equation. I think, are we ready for, so it's my pick. I think we're at the point where we've had the 5 inclusions where they just make a ton of sense. And now it gets a little bit more challenging unless you think there's another obvious candidate. I'm genuinely asking here.
Okay. Okay.
Is there a chance Jamahl Mosley winds up on the hot seat? Because we know it, we know the injuries, we know the defense. What evidence do we have that he's the right offensive coach for the Magic? And if you say none or very little, I think the counterpoint would be, well, how much of that falls on the front office for putting in place, okay, yes, you have Paolo, you have Franjo, you have a very talented team, but you've been unable to bring in more dynamic offensive acquisitions.
Well, you stole my pick. That was my next one. So I'm very glad you brought that up because I was afraid that was going to be very controversial. Look, the one thing that I could come up with here is, hey, did you see the first 5 games of the Magic season before Paolo Banchero went down? They took a shit ton of threes, and that's basically where my argument ends because it's that like that's where we saw a little bit of creativity from him, basically saying, look, we if we have to empower Paulo and Franz to make decisions with the ball in their hands, we need to have shooters. We need to make a ton of threes. We need to get that shut up at an insanely high rate. Obviously, Paulo went down, then Franz went down, then Mo Wagner went down for the entire season, who was also a part of that spacing element, one of their better 3-point shooters, which is pretty sad in its own right, but there we go. um, I mean, I'm just trying to be honest here. But I mean, look, that's what he came up with. I don't hate that plan of saying, all right, let's empower those 2 players, Paolo and Franz, and then let's just make sure we get up like 42 threes per game, 45 threes per game. That's dope. That's a good mentality. But you also don't have the personnel to execute it. And so he had to scale back, and it became a lot of like I don't want to say foul baiting or foul grifting, but I do think the Magic are very good at getting to the free throw line via, drives and perhaps acting out certain things. Like honestly, with all the Shea hate recently in terms of him grifting for fouls, I just kind of want to say, hey, look at the Magic. Just go look at the Magic a little bit once in a while. Um, so I'm wondering with Jamahl, was that just like the default option? Hey, we have 2 very very strong ball handling forwards. The only alternative, because we don't have a primary lead guard, is just to get everyone to take threes. Because if that's the only default he has, though, even though I like the plan, it can't be the whole plan. There has to be more to it. Like I'm surprised we haven't seen more of like I hear me out before you slaughter me here. I'm been surprised why we haven't seen more Cole Anthony minutes because there have been games where they have gone like 4 or 5 minutes without a point, and where you're kind of looking like at that team just completely in a lull where they have no offensive minded players really on the court, and Cole Anthony sitting on the bench just kind of, mm-hmm, my turn soon, like, and where we have not seen Jamahl even look his way, and he's just stuck with defensive lineups. There is a point where coaches can skew too heavily one side or the other. And right now, I think mostly it's like on the fence. Like he skews very much defensively. to the point where are we reaching that point where it's becoming a problem? Like, are we reaching that point where the Magic has to look at that, go into the summer and say, look, defense is great. That's awesome. But we need to score points. And with Jamahl in charge, we just cannot get those extra points out of this roster. That has to be a question. That has to be a conversation.
Cole Anthony stuff is fascinating because he begins the season kind of an afterthought. Injuries force that to change. Then he's playing a bunch. Then he has it was like a toe injury a few weeks ago, and he comes back, and I don't know if he's still maybe dealing with it, but his place in the rotation has been sporadic ever since. And I think you highlighted two of the flaws that I think you can pin on Jamahl Mosley. But again, I don't know. One of them, I do believe, could maybe be a mandate from the front office. But are you too tethered to the idea of we need as many good defenders on the floor as possible when this is a team where what have we known about them? He's been there 4 years, 3 of which they have been elite defensively. And so what have we known about them? That they have a margin for error on the defensive end. So I think he can get too attached. At least he coaches the team that way, because it would be that'd be another reason why hasn't this organization done more to develop Jet Howard here, when in theory he does a lot of what they, again, conceptually would need. And yet he's not somebody that's ever, through his first couple seasons, received a ton of minutes. If you think that's a sort of an indication on the how good Jet Howard is, that's totally fine. That will fall on the front office then. But 4 minutes per game as a rookie, just over 11 minutes per game as a sophomore, it's just
egregious.
Not enough. Yeah, it's egregious. The other thing I will point out, and I think this is maybe not the bigger one, but it matters to me. I'll throw out the first year he's there. It's his first year. We know what the Magic were back then. This team, they are running more this year. They're 16th in transition efficiency. And I know that you have guys in Wagner and Paolo Banchero who kind of like to attack in a more methodical fashion. But when you've ranked in the top 10 of forcing turnovers in each of the 3 years, and yet after you force a turnover, you have been 19th, 23rd, and 23rd again this year, respectively, in transition frequency. This is a team, if we know that you don't have enough spacing, or even enough, if you think you're at an initiation deficit in the half court, what's one of the ways to offset some of that deficit, especially when your players are talented? This isn't like the process Sixers where we play fast just to cover up the fact that we don't have NBA players. It's no, get against more defenses that are scrambling or not set. I've never understood, even this year, being 16th in transition frequency it's better. And I think they're 2 percentage points up in their transition frequency over last year or whatever it ends up being. I think that I don't know if they've defaulted to this idea that you just can't do it as much when Paolo Banchero's on the court. And that's just, no, you can. And off live rebounds, off turnovers that you're forcing. This is a team that I don't know if it would solve everything, but I think it would make me feel a lot better about their offense. They are not nearly as athletic as, say, the Houston Rockets. But when you look at them compared to a team like Memphis, I know that they don't have a Ja Morant. Memphis can play fast. Why can't Orlando? Who do you look at? They've tried. Maybe that's why they didn't play Zach Edey enough this year. As they wanted to play a little faster. But it's I don't look. My point is, even if that's a bad example, I don't look at this personnel and say, "Oh, the Magic don't have room to be in transition more." That is not a takeaway that I have.
Very much agreed.
Do you have another coach on your list?
So, sort of. And it's not about the hot seat specifically. I want to make that perfectly clear. This is a question about a coach right now who is doing very, very well in turning his, getting his team from point A to point B. I'll even go as far as saying he might have been able to get his team from point A to point C this year. But where you have to wonder, is this a guy who they're going to keep for the long term? Is he going to be a championship level coach? We're going to have to go to Detroit. Detroit has made the biggest turnaround in the NBA. JP Bickerstaff has done an amazing job for them. He's still very much similar to Jamahl Mosley, skews defense over offense, and he isn't really the most creative offensive mind out there. I think we also saw that with Cleveland last year. Is he a guy who we are going to have to put on this list 24 months from now?
2 years, that's I mean, maybe because you would at that point, you would have time and a few transaction cycles to go through to see did we
Right.
improve enough with the talent infusion plus the players we already have. What's interesting with him, and he's obviously not on the hot seat now. You do have
Right.
the question
Exactly.
of, is this someone who can get you to a point and then like it's almost I was framing it when I talked about Thibodeau with someone the other day where it's did the Knicks find their JB Bickerstaff to get them to this, 50 win like treadmill, 50 plus win treadmill, and now they need to go find their Kenny Atkinson. And
Right.
so like that could be what the Pistons run into with JB Bickerstaff. It does feel like this season and just the stuff that they put, you have to credit this front office. Like there was just better spacing around Cade, which I think was even with Isaiah Stewart not taking threes was a big deal. But also just like the the juice that he has squeezed out of this team on defense, I know you have a Sar
Yeah.
Thompson, and if he qualified, he'd be on all defense, probably. You have Isaiah Stewart. Their defense for most of this season has exceeded my expectations relative to the personnel. So I'd say he's bought himself not just like they would have to have everyone's available, you get better on paper, and then you win 25 games or something again. So he's bought himself 24 months, but I think it is interesting to ask, like, is he someone who can be, as you framed it, with, okay, they're good, they're really good, can he
Yeah.
get them to great? I mean, I hope he can. I would root for it because the Pistons have
Yeah.
been such a fun story. And it's are we gonna? I don't want to bring this up because I know it's not going to happen. But it's funny that we have. Is it because we have a larger sample size with him and Tibbs? But nobody's really asking that question about Mark Daigneault in Oklahoma City. And so I don't know if it's unfair to ask it of JB Bicker. Like, yeah, I guess we have more evidence, but we're just assuming like the Thunder are so well set that Mark
Right.
Daigneault's not even, and I don't, by the way, I don't think it should, and I don't think it will become a discussion should they flame out in the playoffs this year. Maybe it does, but I do find it somewhat interesting that this is a talking point with JB Bickerstaff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just think it's because there's a previous record, right? I think it's because we have the contrast of the Cavs. Like Biggerstaff leaves, Atkinson comes in. That the team didn't make, a lot of changes over the course of summer. They made some, but he just kind of dialed it differently than how Biggerstaff did, and we saw a dramatic improvement. So I think that was the contrast where you kind of went, "Oh, okay." And there's a lot of the similar DNA with last year's Cavs and this year's Pistons to the point where you're looking at it and going, "Well, what's the top end potential here?" It's interesting you bring in, Daigneault in this because outside of last year, where, obviously they didn't get to the point where they wanted to in the playoffs. I don't feel as though they've ever been in a position where they could truly compete for a title. Like it was last year and this year. So it's been only one playoff year with disappointing results. Is that enough data to go off? Because like this team could win the whole goddamn thing this year. And then we'd never talk about this again.
Well, it kind of comes back to then though, like why was the pressure necessarily on JB Bickerstaff last year mid
Right.
injuries and like it was a 48? Like I honestly, my answer would be I think it comes back to the organization and OKC has set a precedent where people aren't going to speculate in that regard. And when you're looking at the
Right.
Pistons specifically, again, we're way ahead of this type of talk, but you're not the Cavs too. Like you don't trust those organizations on the same level as you do with OKCs. And you're right. I do think the relative unknownness about since Mark Daniel did not have an NBA head coaching position before, it works in his favor here. But just to JB Bickerstaff's credit, like he inherited a Cavs team that like they weren't built to win more than 22 games in his first full season. Then
That's
he
true.
gets them to 44 from there, and it just feels like yeah, I think, you have 2 years after that, but last year there was just a ton of injuries there. Maybe it comes down more to locker room stuff. It's something because we didn't see enough of him in Memphis to just say, okay, he had his 2 seasons there, and like, what was he supposed to accomplish with the rosters he had? So I remain more of a, I don't even know if it's a JB Bickerstaff optimist because I'm not saying anyone or even you as a pessimist, but I do find the discussion around him heavily weighted into just like, okay, Cleveland made a huge jump and then didn't win the championship like in
Mm.
the next 2 years is what it
That's
feels like.
actually fair. That is fair. That is fair. And also, he's still for a coach, he's pretty young. We have seen him get better. We have seen him like learn from mistakes. You know what? I'll actually withdraw that one, I think, because that's fair. That's a really good point. Let's give JB another like at least a year before we bring him up again.
And do you know what I wonder too? And I think this is probably true in any situation. What it seems to accelerate this is, what did the Cavs do during that time? They traded for Donovan Mitchell. And so the
Mhm.
urgency, the expectations skyrocket. And it feels like that, like the Knicks would be a perfect example. Tom Thibodeau's sitting pretty last year, but like you go and you trade for Anunoby right before, a little bit before the trade deadline. Then you trade for Towns, you trade for Mikal Bridges. Like that's part of the reason why I know Tibbs has been there long enough to where you can still have the discussion, but those transaction cycles, if you make one or two really
Mhm.
big moves, and especially if you're depleting your assets, I think what the Pistons have going for them is they don't have a ton of extra assets. And I don't think they're going to act super, I don't want to say aggressively, but reckless over the summer, that they haven't had that type of transaction cycle or that type of summer or a series of a deadline in the summer. It probably works in his favor of, okay, they're
Yeah.
taking, again, this is first year though. Maybe they change course over the summer and they do get ultra aggressive and that increases the stakes. I have one more, coach. It's more of an open question. Does what's happened in Philly this year do anything to move you about, well, what's going to happen with Nick Nurse? And before I really do throw it to you, I'm looking at it from, you could just harp on the injuries and say, okay, and then they lean into the tank for sure. But if they keep their first round pick, they just have what feels like a series of existential decisions to make, to where it's,
Yeah.
okay, are we keeping this pick and trying to develop them while we have Joel Embiid, Paul George, Tyrese Maxey, Quentin Grimes, Jared McCain? Is there a way for them to juggle that? Do they look at trading that player so that they can get some win now talent in here to maximize the window of Embiid, George, and Maxey? Except, oh, how much is Embiid and George going to play specifically? And then if you get into that, and you're wondering, oh, do we take a more gradual approach, or are we going to really invest in player development here alongside our core players? Is Nick Nurse the guy for that? I don't know what direction they need to head for his name to come on this. I don't have him on the hot seat necessarily, but when you have a team in Philly where the expectations were high, you miss them for whatever reason, and now
Yeah.
you might have a top 6 prospect on the roster, I find it
Yeah.
fascinating.
It's really one of those situations where if a team that we feel is, not necessarily going anywhere, jumps up in the draft lottery and gets a chance at like Cooper Flag, for example, that could basically force a team's hand to just say, all right, look, the clock has been reset. We're starting over from scratch. Like every plan that we had before the lottery is now dead. We're starting over. We have to start with the right coach for Cooper Flag. Like that's like again, like the, we brought up the Pelicans. That's a team. If they win the lottery, right? They
Mhm.
could use that as as a springboard to say, okay, that opens up a possibility to trading Scion. That opens up a possibility of trading a bunch of other guys. Like the clock is reset. Yes, the same is absolutely true in this scenario. It's also true for a team like Dallas or Chicago, for example. Like those teams, if they jump up somehow, the clock resets and you have to shuffle your priorities. Like no, I was going to say Toronto, but that's not going to be relevant. They're still going to run that same thing. But it's yeah, circumstances change. Occasionally, they still align with a coach's perspective or a coach's view, or sometimes an organization just head over heels about a guy in charge on the sideline and going, look, we love you whether we're competing for a championship or we're rebuilding and we want to stick with you. And so there are these very different scenarios in play. I guess we'll see. It's funny that we haven't brought up Miami, right? Like, if there's ever a legacy coach who's just never on the hot seat, it's Coach Bo.
I will say, I would love to ask Wes Goldberg, who does a fantastic job covering the Heat for Locked On Heat, about this, because it does seem like the fan base has been more frustrated with Coach Spo over the past 2 years than I sort of remember. And so I think there probably needs to be a fundamental change in the front office first, where it's like, is it someone other than Andy Ellisberg or Pat Riley making this call for that to happen? But I think about how many teams that we even just mentioned or other teams on our list, would they consider just getting rid
Right.
of their head coach should Erik Spoelstra be available?
Like that might be the name for New York if Tips was fired, right? And Coach Bo was ready.
Yes. That would absolutely, I mean, of the teams we mentioned, I think because they're also just the glamour market who probably won't
Right.
care what they're paying him. I mean, I
Yeah.
Like he'd be a fit for like, I still think he's one of the three best head coaches in the league. Is like he's up there with like just in general, not this season, but if you have him, Rick Carlisle's in there. I think that Mark Daigneault has certainly earned the right. Maybe Will Hardy's in there, but certainly one of the top 5 coaches. So yeah, would you be shocked? Like, has it reached that nadir? And especially when, because of the picks, like even if you convey your pick this
Right.
year, which I don't know if they will, but if you convey your pick this year, you're still kind of on a more immediate window because of that Charlotte obligation in 2027. So it feels like you need, and it's just, even from there, it's how do you get better off of Eric, off of Erik Spoelstra?
I don't think you do. I mean, I would be shocked. I would. But at the same time, there's a components to this that I think we might be overlooking a little bit. So remember when he got hired, all the hype was like, oh, one of the youngest head coaches, like 37 or 38 years old, along those lines. Well, he's pushing 55. Like he's 54. He's going to turn 55 this year. So like that matters too. Like there's a part of this where you also kind of go, okay, like the older you get, the more inclined you're going to be a little bit stubborn about how you play. Like there are going to be some pushback from a coach, like, oh, I want to play a certain way, and maybe sometimes, not saying this with Spo, but sometimes coaches kind of get stuck in their prime era, like they don't necessarily realize that the game has shifted because they've been so busy just focusing on their own thing. Tips is a guy who had to adjust on the fly. Like there's a reason that things didn't work out as well in Minnesota as well. Like he came to New York and everyone was a little skeptical of that, but he showed us outside of the minutes distribution that you can't just ice the pick and roll all the time. Like you can't just do the same things you did in Chicago 10 years ago. Like you had to adapt and evolve. To Coach Bo's credit, I feel as though he's done that for the most part. But is that going to be true over the next 5 years? I don't know the answer to that.
I will say, I think of anyone we've mentioned so far, his contract situation just, they signed him in 2024 was the 8-year, $120 million extension. I don't know what the type of options are
Yeah.
at that, but this is the first full season that we're now into that extension. So like that would be, you know what I mean? I want to throw out another name here, and maybe it's more of a category. Who's the head coach that's just most likely to quit? It can be someone we already mentioned, but I thought about like Jason Kidd in Dallas. Does he want no part of what's going on in there? But he's maybe someone who's not super desirable should he hit the open market. Is there even a chance for Jason Kidd that, okay, they trade Anthony Davis this summer for some reason, and then they decide that they need a different look at head coach? Do you look at any situation, like who's the head coach that's just most likely to want out of their current situation rather than we're putting them on the hot seat, but they want to put their organization on the hot seat?
Well, I mean, again, it depends on what happens in the lottery, but if the Bulls win the lottery and start over around Cooper Flag, that is probably going to be the end of it for Billy Donovan, who just does not want to be a part of a rebuilding situation whatsoever. He's made that painfully clear. So, like, those situations can arise, I think.
I think that's probably the names. I'm just going through it and I'm trying to think. I'd be curious to see what Portland just gave Joe Cronin an extension. I'd be curious to see how they really feel about Chauncey Billups after this season. I do not. The defense has been great. I do feel a lot of the times it's personnel driven, and I don't know how much credit to give him for that. But the offense just feels like blah, to like too blah at points. Like doesn't like kind of absent of defining principles. And then I have not been thrilled with the way that, and like Scoot Henderson's had a better year, but he was not as good like post All-Star break. And like how much of that falls on Chauncey Billups for not doing more? Because I don't think the person, like when you look at him and Denny Avdia and even Donovan Klingen's finishing, I just think the personnel impacts that a lot because the spacing in Portland is meh. But that's just sort of another name where it's, well, does Portland consider him like the guy to, and we now know Cronin would have the latitude, I would think, to make that call. But have, like after this season specifically, when the defense and a lot of individual players have made like these strides, do you make that call? But also Portland doesn't seem to necessarily be invested in this super gradual timeline anymore based off them going out and getting Denny Avdia in the first place. And it looks like that's going to work out. They're all sorts of, despite all the encouraging signs, despite the the breadth of talent there. Like they're deep with NBA talent,
Yep.
one of the deepest
Yep.
teams in the league. They're just so fuzzy and hazy moving forward for me.
I wouldn't hate a coaching change there, but to answer your question, just a guy who will just flat out leave. Do you think Charles Lee is just like, you know what? I can't with this guy anymore. I can't with this franchise anymore. This 1 year's enough. Nope.
Do you know what I think works in one? He worked so long to get the head coaching job, but also the fact that it's a different front office in Charlotte. If this was Mitch Kupchak circa a couple of years ago, okay, maybe, but it does seem like Jeff Peterson and crew understand what needs to happen. The Hornets are probably like they're still really far away, but they don't. I get what you're saying, like, but yeah, I could see just being subjected to the injuries of it all. Like, for maybe the organizational culture is great, but the injuries of it all, and it's and LaMelo's rigid defensive stances. Yeah, I'm out.
Right.
I'll go be an assistant for a couple more years and then come back as a head coach.
No, I honestly I don't think there's anyone who's like a prime candidate to just up and leave out of nothing, right? I mean,
well, I think we may have mentioned him.
All right.
Michael Malone. Like that just seems like a situation. Like remember the Rick Carlisle Mavericks thing where it was like, I'm going to get you before you get me. Couldn't you? And I think his contract was at more of an organic pivot point. I can't remember off rip, but that would be the name where it's, I love coaching Nikola Jokic, but I'm a championship head coach. I'll probably get another opportunity, even if I have to sit out a year. If things just go sour between him and the front office, since that dynamic, let's put it kindly, it's at least not peachy keen.
Right. But like you would still be the coach who decided on his own terms to leave a situation where he was coaching perhaps the best center of all time.
I mean, Rick Carlisle decided and it's different. Rick Carlisle clashed with Luka, and it doesn't seem like Michael Malone and Jokic have ever had that issue.
No, they seem to greatly respect one another.
I did wonder, let's just say now that the ownership change is going to be official, assuming the Board of Governors ratifies it, if they decide to cut costs again, or if Tim Connolly decides that he wants to leave because he has, is there any chance that Chris Finch is just sort of like, bye guys, like I can't do this anymore?
I mean, look, that might actually be a fairly reasonable answer. You know, because there will be jobs for him out there, I would imagine.
I would agree.
Right?
Yeah. If I had to pick one, it would be Michael Malone. There just doesn't seem like a ton of good candidates here. But if there was sort of a shot, maybe a situation that you would call fairly shocking, where it's, I can't get to like this Spoelstra tier, but something like Chris Finch in Minnesota, just like because that franchise has been an acid trip the past couple years specifically because of just the highs and the mediums, I guess, that they've explored.
Well, I mean, look, you know what would be funny as fuck? Is JJ Redick going, you know what, I prefer podcasting, and just saying, nope, this wasn't for me.
I'd like to get in a role where me, Steve Nash, and LeBron are podcasting together. I think that's the right call for me.
Well, remember when Magic Johnson was like, no, I'm resigning as the GM of the Lakers because I want to tweet again? Like,
oh yeah. Well, maybe it's a stupid question, but like they haven't necessarily shown a ton of progress under him. If the Spurs gig came open, or if he thought there might be a better fit, could you see just something brewing with Quinn Snyder in Atlanta? Maybe they don't fight him if he wants to leave, or is he going to want to be there if they take Trae Young trade calls, which I don't necessarily. I honestly feel like Ja Morant's more likely to get moved this offseason than Trae Young at this point. So that's a situation where I like Quinn Snyder as a head coach. I don't hate the fit, even relative to the personnel. They've had some just really good stretches this year, but I don't know that, is this the right fit for both of those parties?
Where would he be good though? That's where
San Antonio is the one where it's Pop decides not to come back. Do you investigate that? Would he want to,
then Mitch Johnson should be on the list for so many teams.
What about, if Michael Malone got fired or left, Quinn Snyder in Denver could be really interesting.
That actually could be fun. Yeah. Jokic will play for the high caliber coaches as well. I think he'll play for anyone, but like there has to be a certain level of know-how, a certain level of respect there. I think like you have to be really cautious with that hire if that becomes available.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you ask him his say, but he doesn't seem like the type of player who would give his input, right? And if anything, I think we didn't talk about this enough with Michael Malone. I know we mentioned it tangentially. If you're going to you need to make sure that that's not going to disenfranchise Jokic in any way.
Right. So I actually don't subscribe to the idea that he's not like involved. I don't think he's a guy who's just like completely hands off. I do think like they will occasionally run stuff by Jokic and he'll be like, yeah, that works for me. Gotta go back to my horses. Like that's probably one of those things. But I it'd be crazy not to. And like I know that people have this idea of him that he's he shies away from the media. He's very passive. He's like an introvert. He's Serbian. Trust me, he's not introverted. That is not. He is not. Like he will share his opinion, and we've heard that before as well. So I think getting his input is crucial, absolutely crucial. Like you have to find the exact right coach. You have to ask him. You have to figure something out. And yeah, you absolutely do not. You do not fire Michael Malone without having asked Jokic first. And I honestly believe Jokic is going to be like, why? Why do you want to do that? And if they come back to him with something like, well, he and us, we don't really get along. Jokic will just like look at it, stare at them, going, not my problem. Like just get Coach Malone back. That's what I want. So if it comes down to Jokic, I don't think Mike Malone goes anywhere.
We said we were going to do 45 minutes on this. We did 80 plus. So you're welcome, or I'm sorry, everybody. More as usual, could you just let our fantastic subscribers know where they can find your fantastic self and all the fantastic work that you do?
Well, I write for Yahoo Sports. I write for Forbes. I do the NBA podcast. I also do Buzzer Beater, a Danish podcast. So that is where you can find me. And I link to most of it. I'm really bad at linking to my own stuff. I'm really horrible at it. I need to get so much better. But I usually link to stuff over on Blue Sky, where you can find me at MSJ.
Big fan of Mort's work. Go check him out if you've not already. Links from the podcast and YouTube description. Until next time, and as always, we leave you to shout out to the one, the only, the indelible Frank Ntilikina.